Now, there is a big anniversary coming up this week. This Monday marks the silver anniversary of SmackDown. 25 years to the day that the show premiered as a weekly series on network television. What was UPN Network at the time. I should note this was not technically the first episode. They aired a pilot episode in April of 1999 that did well enough that they picked it up as a weekly series 4 months later. And WWE, they were hot at the time. I mean, really, it was the peak of their popularity and rating success in the Attitude Era. I mean, they were doing shows on Monday nights that were doing 6s and 7s. And so SmackDown premiered in August of 99, and that was, again, it wasn't cable, so they weren't doing 6s and 7s on there on UPN. But because of just their overall popularity and how hot the product was and wrestling was at the time, SmackDown was born, and here we are now, 25 years later. In celebration of this, I thought I would put together my own personal list of the top 25 matches and moments in SmackDown history. Now, I will tell you, this is not a ranked list. It is a mix of matches and moments. I've narrowed it down to 25. They are in no particular order. They are not in date order. They are not in rank order. I mean, 25 years is a long time. And I just wanted to distill this down to what I think are the 25 best, most memorable, most fun. There may be a few gems that I'm missing. I'm sure there are. If so, you can fill me in on what you would have on your list. But this is my list, not your list. And I'm including the episode dates for those of you who want to look them up on Peacock. I will start here with that very first episode on August 26th, 1999, taped 2 nights earlier at Kemper Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. This was WWE's first time back in that venue since Owen Hart fell to his death in that building 3 months earlier. It's only 90 days before this. Now, at the time, WCW already had Thursday Night Thunder on TBS. I didn't bother with Thunder. Thunder was basically what AEW Collision is today. It's a show that I check out when I can. I keep up with what's going on, but it's not a priority for me. But when SmackDown debuted on Thursdays, I was there for it. Chris Jericho made his in-ring debut on that show against Road Dogg. But it was the main event that I remember well. It was Triple H defending the WWF title that he had only won on Raw 24 hours earlier, defending against The Rock, with Commissioner Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. It's a very memorable finish. Rock goes for the people's elbow, only to come off the ropes and eat a super kick from HBK. Triple H wins. It made me want to see Rock against Shawn Michaels. Watching this, if you were a regular fan just tuning in, you would think that maybe they were building up to it. Nope. I thought that was the plan. I thought, hey, Shawn's going to come back. He's going to get in the ring with The Rock. This is going to be great. We never got Rock against Shawn Michaels. Shawn was still out with the back injury, and Rock had no interest in working with him. He had no love lost for Shawn Michaels at that time. I think they're on better terms now. But back then, it goes all the way back to when Shawn was younger and he worked the territory in Hawaii and apparently was very disrespectful to Rock's grandmother. And Rock never forgot that. I do wonder what the plan was, though, coming out of this, because Shawn had been a babyface. Then he pulled a heel move here and he cost Rock the title and he celebrated with Triple H in China. Whatever their plans may have been, because I'm sure we would have gotten more Shawn on TV, maybe not wrestling, but he would have been a presence on the show. Those plans were scuttled after Shawn went on their Bite This internet show, and he complained about Stone Cold not doing a clean job for Triple H at SummerSlam. That was when they inserted Mankind into the main event, and Mankind won the title. Then Triple H beat Mankind for the belt the next night. He made comments to the effect of, I was hurt going into my match with Austin at WrestleMania, and it would have been nice if I could have had the luxury of having a third man in the ring too. And how if I was the one in that match at SummerSlam, that shit would have gone down the right way. That shit would have gone down the way it was supposed to go. I don't think he was used on TV after that. Not as much as they had planned to. Similar to when Steve Austin went on Bite This in 2002 and he complained about how poor the creative was. And then magically, a few weeks later, Vince McMahon is telling him, hey, I want you to do a job at a King of the Ring qualifying match on TV to Brock Lesnar. And Austin said, see ya. He walked out. We didn't see him again for another 8 months. 2 weeks later, on the September 9th, 1999 episode of SmackDown, we got what was the first and remains to this day the only buried alive match to ever air on television and not on pay-per-view, with Rock and Mankind defending their tag team titles against The Big Show and The Undertaker. I am a mark for the buried alive stipulation. I don't know why. I just always loved that stip. I have not necessarily loved every buried alive match that I've seen, but I love the first one, and I like this one here. I was always hoping they would add it to one of the video games, which I think they eventually did. By that point, I wasn't playing them anymore. But I'm talking like in the early days, or like Warzone and Attitude and maybe the first SmackDown versus Raw, like those games. I was like, man, they got to add a buried alive mode to these games. And I was so pissed they didn't have one. But this is the match that gave us that great gif of Triple H shoveling dirt on Mankind in the grave. Oh, how that gif has come in useful for many a buried meme when it comes to Triple H. It's just too perfect. He wasn't even in the match, but he ended up burying Mankind to give the titles to Undertaker and Big Show. But the absolute best moment of this entire match, or the worst, if you're poor Mick Foley, Big Show and Mankind are on the stage. And, the whole plot of dirt and everything in the grave is off to the side of the stage. And the spot is that Big Show is going to toss Mankind off the stage far enough that he lands right in the open grave. Now, if you watch it back, it's way too far. I don't know what they were thinking. It's way too far. So I don't know how they figured that Foley would even be able to make it. It's not like he was in prime physical condition to begin with. But in one of his books, Foley said that was the goal. He cleared the distance from the stage to the dirt mound, but he fell short of the open grave, and when he landed on the dirt, he bounced right on his hip. He bounced into the grave. I actually think it made for a better visual. But in the history of crazy Mick Foley bumps, I don't think this one gets talked about enough, right? It may not be the craziest he's ever done, but it's still pretty crazy. It might not be a hole in one, but it made for a great visual. A few weeks later, on September 30th, 1999, The Rock served as the guest referee for a match between Triple H and the British Bulldog. Rock was headed for a match with the Bulldog in No Mercy. He promised to call this match right down the middle, and I guess he did. He gave Triple H a rock bottom, but then he also refused to count 3 when Bulldog went for the pin. He also ended up blasting Bulldog and Triple H in the head with the belt when Bulldog tried to use it on him. And then came one of the greatest moments in SmackDown history. The sliding people's elbow. In his dress shoes, Rock comes off the ropes and he slides. It had to be a good 3 feet before dropping the elbow on the Bulldog. He looked like the coolest motherfucker in the room. I don't think you can have a credible list of top SmackDown moments and not include the sliding people's elbow. Number 22. And again, these are not ranked. I'm just assigning numbers to them so I can keep track of where I'm at. A couple of months later, WWE pulled off a nice coup by getting Arnold Schwarzenegger to make a guest appearance on the show to promote his new film, End of Days, where Satan visits New York looking for a woman to marry, and Arnold is an ex-cop who has to try to stop him. I'm sorry to say I watched that movie, and I have not watched it again since. But this was the November 11th, 1999 episode of SmackDown. Vince McMahon presented him with a replica version of the Big Eagle belt in the middle of the ring. And Arnold did commentary for the main event, which was an elimination match, since they were trying to get people all hyped up for Survivor Series. After the match, Triple H took a swing at Arnold, who dodged it and then beat the hell out of Triple H. Austin laid out Helmsley and then shared some beers with Arnold in the ring. I remember it like it was yesterday. The fans went nuts when Arnold started raining shots down on Triple H. And he looked like he was having the time of his life out there. He missed his calling. Arnold could have definitely had a career in wrestling as a wrestler, but just I feel like any kind of character, he would have fit in perfectly in that world. Number 21, September 11th, 2003. I could not tell you anything else about that episode, but John Cena and Eddie Guerrero had a famous parking lot brawl on that show. That was a lot of fun. They were in the parking garage. They had various cars forming a circle, like a fight pit almost, and they fought in the middle. Cena was rocking the Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick, and this was the first real memorable match of his from that run. Chavo got involved to help out his Uncle Eddie. Eddie finished Cena off with a frog splash off the roof of a car onto Cena, who was laid out on the hood of another car. A fun, memorable brawl. Number 20. Life sucks, and then you die. Those were the famous words of one Vince McMahon on the May 11th, 2000 episode of SmackDown. Back when the McMahon-Helmsley faction was running the show, they were all gathered in the ring for what turned out to be one of the best promos in WWE history. In fact, I had this ranked number 9 on the top 9 promos list that I did many years ago. Vince turned out to be a heel in real life, too. But that Mr. McMahon character is, in my opinion, the greatest heel of all time. This promo and his delivery is one of the reasons. He healed on the fans in the audience that night, said that the same kind of people who would wait in line like sheep, waiting your turn, then you see somebody like him cut in front of the line and you'll say, wait a minute, that's not fair. Then there's the parking lot. There you are, patiently waiting for your parking space. And suddenly it appears. You start driving towards it and then, oops, someone zips in, cuts you off, parks their car, and you say, wait a minute, that's my parking spot. That's not fair. Then he talks about those occasions where you look in the mirror, or as he used to say, the mirror. You look in the mirror. And you women, you see the cellulite hanging from your hips and your butt. That's not fair. And you men, you take a quick peek and you think, that can't be me, with the pot belly and the small genitalia. Oh no, that's not fair. Then he talked about the money. It's all about the money. You scrimp and you save, you work yourselves half to death, and still you can't afford what you really want. That's not fair. It's not fair that some people are rich and you're not. And then, to close things out, talks about how you just have to face the facts that the vast majority of you are born with inferior DNA. And you say, it's not fair that I'm born with inferior DNA. But you feel sorry for yourselves. You wallow in your self-pity. And then there comes a point where you have to face the facts that life is not fair. And you may as well own up to the philosophy for some of you, and that is that life sucks and then you die. Can't do it quite as good as he did, but that was the gist of it. It was a classic Mr. McMahon promo. And not entirely inaccurate, what he was saying. But that had to be on this list because it's just such a great promo. And at the very end, when he has that line, the life sucks and then you die, you could see X-Pac is like in the background right behind him. And he's just like, he's nodding his head like, yeah, this was great. Number 19, Gore, Gore, Gore. August 9th, 2001, the end of the original SmackDown set. This was the night that Rhino gored Chris Jericho through the screen and collapsed the set. It was a great visual. It was part of the SmackDown intro for years, the highlights of this. The reason they did it was to make way for a new set that they created. In the following week, we had the debut of the SmackDown Fist, just sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and Marilyn Manson's The Beautiful People as the new theme song for SmackDown. Number 18. Never in the history of this company has someone had the rocket strapped to them as quickly and as impressively as Brock Lesnar did in 2002. He debuted on television in April. He won the King of the Ring in June. And in the span of 60 days, from June to August, Vince McMahon wanted to put Brock over Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, and The Rock. Like, legitimately the 3 biggest names in the history of this company. Two of those matches being on television, not even on pay-per-view. Austin walked out rather than do the job for Brock in a King of the Ring qualifier. Brock pinned Rock to win the title at SummerSlam. But in between, it was the week before SummerSlam that Lesnar put his number one contendership on the line in a match on the August 8th, 2002 episode of SmackDown against Hulk Hogan. The match itself, nothing special, but it was an attraction. Hogan Andre, WrestleMania 3. How is it as a match, right? As a match, nothing terribly special. But, you know, the slam heard round the world is still the most iconic moment in the history of this company. So sometimes it's just about what you feel, right? It feels like a big deal. It feels like a big match. This felt like a big match. It was definitely an attraction. The past against the present. Or the future. Kind of monster heel that Hogan would have loved to work with in his heyday and of course would have beaten. But those days were over. The goal here was to put Lesnar over strong heading into SummerSlam. He got to kick out of the leg drop. He hit an F5. But instead of pinning him, he locked Hogan in a bear hug. And Hogan went out. Blood pouring from his mouth from internal injuries. Lesnar wins by ref stoppage. That was a shocking way for Hogan to lose even then. But then we got the visual of Lesnar rubbing Hogan's blood across his own chest. He looked like an animal. It looked like something animalistic that you would see, you know, in the woods. If you were hiding behind a tree and you were watching predators go at it, this is the sort of thing that you would see. This was the moment where you knew they had big plans for Brock Lesnar. After that, Hogan and Vince, they had a falling out again. He pulled himself off the Australian tour that he was advertised for. And as the story goes, he wanted to also get his win back on Brock at Survivor Series at Madison Square Garden and win the belt. But that would have been ridiculous. Thankfully, that did not happen. Although he did come back in January. Number 17 is Edge, cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase on The Undertaker to win the World Heavyweight Championship on the May 11th, 2007 episode of SmackDown. How we got here was a bunch of people got hurt. Plain and simple. Undertaker had just won the world title from Batista at WrestleMania. He was supposed to have a long run with the belt, possibly the rest of the year. This is when Undertaker, I mean, my God, he had gotten himself into the best shape of his career. This was Undertaker at his physical peak, like Undertaker in his final form. He was in better shape here than he was in the 90s. And then he tore his bicep tendon, and he needed surgery, and it was going to keep him out for a number of months. Meanwhile, Mr. Kennedy had just won Money in the Bank at WrestleMania, and he announced that he was going to wait and cash in at next year's WrestleMania, which was legitimately the plan until The Undertaker got hurt. Then the plan was to have Kennedy cash in early, until Kennedy got hurt with what was initially diagnosed as a triceps tear, which would have kept him on the shelf for 6 months. So they panicked, and they very hastily booked a match on Raw where Kennedy agreed to put his briefcase on the line against Edge. Edge beat him for the briefcase. Edge then was shifted from Raw to SmackDown, and he won the World Championship from The Undertaker. His second Money in the Bank cash-in. Only to then find out that Kennedy was misdiagnosed and his triceps tendon was not torn off the bone like they thought. And he was back in a matter of weeks. But the damage was done. They already took the briefcase from him, and he never recovered from that. You know, that man would have been world champion. And his career might have turned out very different. But things happen. And things go a different way. And it's amazing. You know, sometimes you hit that fork in the road. You can go left or right. It looks like you're going to go right. Shit happens. You go left. And that's just the way it goes. So what happened instead, Undertaker wrestled a 30-minute cage match with Batista on SmackDown with his arm wrapped. Won what I remember being actually a very good match. Then he got attacked by Mark Henry, and then Edge, as Henry was leaving, Edge comes out with another referee, swoops in, wins the title. This was the beginning of the Edge era on SmackDown. That was his show there for a couple years, at least a couple years. And it was the best thing that could have happened to him because it allowed him to get away from Raw and make SmackDown his show. which he never would have been able to do on the other show with, people like John Cena and Triple H. So even the effects that it had on Edge's career, it's amazing how everything is connected. Either Undertaker goes on to have a long run as the World Heavyweight Champion, Kennedy holds on to the briefcase until the following year like he promised to, and who knows where Edge ends up. Or Kennedy does cash in, and same thing, where does Edge end up? But then you see the way it played out. It worked out for Edge, not so much for Kennedy. Number 16, the Big Boss Man. The Big Boss Man, in 1999, he was just a different kind of heel. One of the most irredeemable pieces of shit to ever grace the wrestling ring. The way that this man tortured poor Al Snow and Big Show that year. It truly is one of the great despicable heel runs of all time. I don't care what anybody says. And there's 2 segments from SmackDown that year. I'm going to lump them together here in one spot. The first being the segment where he fed Al Snow's dog to him. Telling you, man, the Attitude Era was wild. Bossman had been feuding with Al over the hardcore title, and he had dog-napped his little chihuahua, Pepper. And Al just wanted his dog back. So when Bossman invited him to his hotel room, it was the September 2nd, 1999 episode, he thought he was getting Pepper back. What he got was some pepper steak. Bossman prepared a meal for him and promised, just have the food, enjoy the food. It's like him trying to say, I'm sorry, basically. And if you have the food, I promise I'll give you the dog back. So Al starts to eat and he's asking him, how does it taste? Don't get one of those paws stuck in between your teeth. Then Al realized he was eating his own dog. And he starts puking all over the place. Bossman beats him senseless with his nightstick. And then Bossman took a bite and he said, tastes like chicken. The look on Jerry Lawler's face when they cut back to the arena, his eyes were just damn near bugging out of his head. Feeding the man's dog to him. In the history of heel moves, I would say that ranks pretty high up there. I don't know how you get any worse than that. But somehow, arguably, he managed to, because that brings us to the Arnold Schwarzenegger episode on November 11th. Bossman had moved on from Al Snow. Now he was feuding with the Big Show. They created a storyline where Big Show's father had passed away. Now, I think in real life, his father was already dead. Bossman absolutely tormented this man. He even broke into his mother's house, and on live television, he forced Big Show's mom to reveal that Show was a bastard child. But the coup de grace of this all was his father's funeral. As Bruce Pritchard tells the story, this was Big Show's idea. He credits Big Show for the idea. They shot this at a cemetery in Connecticut. There was a real funeral service that was going on nearby, and they were warned, okay, we'll let you use the cemetery for your shoot, although there's no fucking way they knew what these guys were planning on doing. But they agreed, okay, you can use it, but just don't be disruptive, and please don't tear up the grounds, right? I mean, these are grave sites here. They failed on both. Bossman shows up in the middle of the ceremony as they're, paying tribute to Big Show's father, and the casket is there, and the family members are mourning, and Big Show's wearing leather pants, because who among us does not wear leather pants at their father's funeral? And here comes the Big Boss Man, driving through the cemetery in the old Blues Brothers car with a giant speaker on top, shouting that he's glad the old bastard is dead. Big Show goes after him. He starts climbing onto the hood of the car. Boss Man puts the car in reverse, and Big Show falls to the ground. All the family members rush over to check on poor Big Show. Meanwhile, Bossman goes over. He chains the casket with Big Show's dead father inside to the back of the car, and he begins to drive off, dragging the casket behind him, and in the process, tearing the shit out of the ground. Big Show dives onto the casket as it's being dragged. He's riding it like a sled. It's like he's surfing. He's body surfing on top of the casket. Until he fell over. He took this amazing slow motion bump where he did a complete flip on his head. Like, it was the tree bump. That's what it is. You saw the match between Shawn Michaels and Psycho Sid at Survivor Series that year? It's the tree bump. That's what Big Show did. Just an amazing scene. And an absolutely terrible thing to do in someone's final resting place, as a cemetery is. But Bruce, always the courageous one, said that he hightailed it out of there once they got what they needed, and he left the production assistant to deal with the fallout. And they were banned from ever using that cemetery ever again after that. I can't imagine why. Number 15, John Cena's debut on the June 27th, 2002 episode. For historical purposes, if nothing else, this has to be on the list. And it was a memorable segment. Kurt Angle was out there. He issued an open challenge to any talent in the back that he never wrestled before. And out comes John Cena. And I will admit, I am one of these people. I know Santino said it for comedy for many years on TV, but when I first saw this man's name spelled out, whatever newsletter or website it would have been back then that I saw his name on, I saw John Cena. I didn't read it as John Cena for whatever reason. For whatever reason, I read it as John Cena. So until they spoke it on TV, I'm thinking this guy's name is John Cena. Of course, now I look back, I feel like a fucking idiot. But I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know this guy from a hole in the wall. How the hell am I supposed to know? So out comes John Cena to answer the challenge, looking like a generic, just prototype straight out of a creator wrestler mode. Kurt asks him, what makes you think that you can hang with me? And Cena says, ruthless aggression, which is what Vince McMahon, the phrase that he had coined, I think it was maybe that week on TV. It was on Raw. When he had the whole roster around the ring, he says, I'm looking for ruthless aggression, right? So he says ruthless aggression. He smacks the shit out of Kurt, and we were off to the races. And they had a very basic 5-minute match. Kurt pinned him. But this was our introduction to John Cena on television. And there was still a moment months later where he was this close from being released. He was going to get cut until Stephanie McMahon happened to be riding on the same tour bus wherever they were. They might have been on an international tour, maybe. Stephanie's in the front of the bus and she hears him rapping because I guess a lot of the guys were like freestyling. So he got in on it. He goes, I can do that. Stephanie overhears this and the rest is history. Saved his job. Think of where John Cena is today. Big star in Hollywood. Does any of this happen if not for that moment? It's one of those things in life you can never say yes or no absolutely, right? Maybe he still would have ended up being a big star. Maybe he would have gotten cut, but they would have rehired him later on and he would have been a champion anyway. Maybe his life would have taken him down a very different path, right? Who knows? But it was the moment with Angle here that started it all. And now here we are. This man's about to have his retirement tour. And they call him the greatest of all time every time we see him on TV. Number 14, The Shield. The Shield was unbeatable for the first half of 2013. I love The Shield. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. They were pushed to the moon from the moment they stepped onto the scene at Survivor Series the year before. So it felt like a big deal when they finally lost on the June 14th, 2013 episode of SmackDown. It was Randy Orton, Daniel Bryan, and Kane against Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose. Orton put Rollins down with an RKO, and then Bryan tapped him out in the yes lock. And the fans lost their minds. They were so happy to finally see these men lose. It was the go-home show to Payback that Sunday. Roman and Seth, they beat Bryan and Orton, so they got their win back. But the Shield's first loss, that was a big deal. And I love that run. I love the Shield run. One of the greatest groups ever assembled was the Shield. Number 13, Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle. They had one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history. Bobby the Brain Heenan told friends of his that he thought it was the greatest wrestling match he had ever seen. So much so that he reached out to Howard Finkel to get their phone numbers so he could call them up personally and let them know. And then when he talked to Kurt, he played a rib on him by asking if he can get him a job in the company. But for Bobby Heenan to tell you that it was the greatest match he ever saw, better than any Ray Stevens match, Nick Bockwinkel match, any of the great stars that he himself managed, Andre, perfect, Flair, Think of all the matches that this man was a part of, let alone must have seen in his life. I can think of no greater compliment than that. And in the lead up to that match, Kurt was out to show that anything Shawn could do, he could do better. He went back into the past and he wrestled Marty Jannetty on SmackDown. But that's not the moment I have on my list here. What he also did was on the March 24th, 2005 episode, he came to the ring dressed like Shawn Michaels, out to Shawn Michaels music, and he even brought out with him Shawn's old manager, Sensational Sherry. This is where we got the rendition, the classic rendition, the legendary rendition of Sexy Kurt. I'll make your ankle hurt. A classic moment and a song that is still stuck in my head almost 20 years later. Kurt could do it all, man. Kurt Angle could do it all. He could go from goofy comedy like this to a week later tapping out Shawn Michaels in a totally serious wrestling match, looking like an absolute killer. Just the way he was able to flip the switch like that, it's why he's one of the absolute GOATs. Number 12. There have been a lot of great Bloodline segments on SmackDown over the past few years. The Tribal Court segment from Madison Square Garden last year being one of the very best. And I struggled with which one to feature here, but I just can't rank it above the Usi segment from the October 28th, 2022 episode of SmackDown. Roman Reigns wanted the Bloodline to hash out their differences. Specifically, he was talking about Sami Zayn and Jey Uso, who did not like Sami Zayn for many, many months. He was vehemently against Sami Zayn being brought into the family, being brought into the Bloodline. He didn't agree with it. He didn't trust him. He didn't like him. The other thing is Sami had made it his mission to make as many members of the Bloodline crack up on live TV as he possibly could every single week, whether it was in the ring, whether it was in a backstage segment. And so here, it finally came to a head. And the two of them were arguing, and Roman is, again, the way that this was like positioned and shot was just so perfect, because Roman is standing in front of them. They're behind him, and they're arguing like a couple of kids. And then we hear Jey Uso, who had a short fuse. Of course, this is a totally different Jey Uso that we see today. The Jey Uso we see today is almost too goofy. You know, everything is yeet, and he's out there, and he's happy-go-lucky. But back then, you know, part of his character was that he had a short fuse. He was in a foul mood most of the time when we saw him. And he could go off on you at any moment. And he went off here. He says, I don't give a damn what the tribal chief says. Because Sami was trying to tell him, look, the tribal chief said, he goes, I don't give a damn what the tribal chief says. And then Roman's head just snaps up. And he's looking directly ahead into the hard cam. They zoom in on his face and he looks pissed. And everybody in the crowd realizes, okay, you done fucked up. And so then he goes over to talk to Jey, and Sami is standing there, and Sami is trying to diffuse the situation. He says, Roman, he didn't mean that. He's trying to calm things down here. And he says that Jey isn't feeling very Usi. That was it. It all broke down after that. Jey Uso is standing in the middle of the ring. He's not even by the ropes. He can't like hold on to anything. It's like you could hold on to the rope, or like if you were, you know, there's like a banister or something, just like grab onto it, and he can't do anything. He's standing there. He's got nowhere to go. It's the theater in the round, right? No matter which way you look, you can't hide your face. He's burying his face in his hands. He's trying so hard not to crack up laughing. He is fighting for his life in the middle of this ring, and there is nowhere to hide. And it was to the point where, you know, the Usi line just came out of nowhere. I don't even think it was planned. It happens. And even in the background, like you can see Paul Heyman is struggling a little bit, and Jimmy is in the corner, and he's at least able to hide it kind of a little bit. Solo Sikoa, to his credit, is stoic the entire time. His expression never changed. Solo, I mean, his poker face is perfect. So it didn't really have any effect on him. Even Roman was struggling not to crack up laughing. And Roman said, look, I'm going to take away the honorary on Sammy's t-shirt. He's not going to be the honorary Uso anymore. He's going to name him Sammy Uso. And then we got the zoom in on Sammy's face, which is so wholesome. And it was so perfect. But poor Jey Uso, man. I mean, it was just, what do you do? Look, I get the giggles sometimes. It's impossible. You can't stop it. It's just nothing you can do. You just have to let it play through. There's nothing that you can do. There's absolutely nothing that you can do. But it made for very entertaining television. This is still my favorite of all the Bloodline segments. Right? There have been some great ones. None better than this one, though. This has to be in the top 25. I might even have this in my top 10. I don't know, but it's definitely in the top 25. Number 11, November 15th, 2001. 3 days before Team WWF wrestled the Alliance at Survivor Series, and the invasion storyline came to an end, thankfully. As bungled as that invasion story was, it gave us one of the all-time great segments in SmackDown history. Paul Heyman's worked shoot. His worked shoot promo on Vince McMahon. The pipe bomb, long before CM Punk dropped one of his own. According to Heyman, Vince did not want to know what he was going to say. So he had no idea what was coming. And he even told Heyman, I'm not even going to respond to you. Like, I'm going to come out in the middle of the segment. You'll continue your promo. I will stand there and you'll just give it to me. And I won't say a word. He said, just go out there and draw me money. It's the go-home show. Just draw me money. It was the kind of promo that probably did sell a lot of pay-per-views. So it accomplished that goal. The way that Heyman managed to blend reality and storyline was masterful. He says, I've waited so long to tell you to your face that I hate your guts. He called Vince the most disgusting, vile human being. Who knew how right he was? He said that he used Hulk Hogan's blood to build Titan Towers. He stole Bret Hart's dream and made himself a nice big plane with, he got himself a nice plane with WWF. Plastered all over it. And he stole Shawn Michaels' smile and made himself a billionaire, all these things. He said Vince's dad, he knew Vince's father. Vince's father is the one that allowed him or was paying him to take photographs in Madison Square Garden back in the day. So he said Vince's dad, he promised the other promoters that he wouldn't compete. And then when he died, you competed. And you put all the promoters out of business. You stole my ideas and branded it Attitude. And he told Vince, he goes, you got nothing. What you've got are my ideas. You stole my life, my money, my legacy. And he threw his hat at him. Said, screw you and your family. I gotta tell you something. Your own children hate your guts. And on Sunday, your children are going to get even with you. For everything you stole from me, for everything that you stole from them, you flaunt your affairs in front of your wife. You flaunt your affairs in Playboy for your children to read. And he told them, you make wrestling a dirty word. He even healed on Taz. Taz was out there doing color at the time with Michael Cole. He pointed over at Ted. He goes, look at Taz. This man was a killer. He was, whatever. He was respected. He was a killer. And now he's a fat, little, obnoxious color commentator and not even a good one. And that was Taz's cue to get in the ring. Now, Taz didn't actually know what the cue was. All Heyman says is you'll know it when it comes. And so Taz got up. He got into the ring. And he choked out Heyman with a very stiff Tazmission. It's worth watching the entire thing because, again, I'm just paraphrasing parts of it. But that is how you sell a pay-per-view. Then Heyman was fired on TV the following Monday, and then the next time we saw him after that, he was with some new guy named Brock Lesnar. Number 10, Edge and Christian, the Hardys, and the Dudleys. They innovated the tables, ladders, and chairs match. Their best one, in my opinion, TLC 2, the WrestleMania X7. The very next month, they were asked to do it again, but this time with an extra team involved. That gave us TLC 3 on the May 24th, 2001 episode of SmackDown, a match that these men only had 5 hours to put together on short notice. Matt Hardy said that Vince McMahon told them it's very important that they get Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit over that night, especially with Triple H going down with his quad injury the night before on Raw. Because remember, this was taped the night after. It aired 2 days later. But it was the night before that Triple H tore his quad for the first time, finished the match, and Jericho and Benoit won the titles, which was the plan, but whatever they had planned for the follow-up the next night was blown to smithereens. Suddenly, they were being asked to pull another TLC match out of their asses like it was nothing. And it was a great match, but it ended up being significant for another reason. There was a spot in the match where Chris Benoit did his signature diving headbutt off the top through a table on the floor, which is very stupid, by the way. Through a table on the floor. Matt Hardy was laid out across the table. He rolled off, and Benoit went through the table head first. So he got carted out to the back, which was planned. Came back out later on. He won the match for his team, but he really did get hurt on that headbutt spot. He just didn't realize it, or at least realize how serious it was. That's the bump that caused the neck injury that he would later need fusion surgery for. And I know on TV they credited the injury to the match at the King of the Ring. It didn't happen there. It happened in this match. And he continued to wrestle for weeks until the King of the Ring pay-per-view, where they needed him in the main event. It was a triple threat match with Stone Cold defending the title against Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. If you thought that Triple H beating Booker T at WrestleMania with one pedigree was bad, that it took forever for him to crawl over to make the cover, you got to see the ending of this match. Benoit gives Jericho a back suplex from the top, and the match didn't even have that much heat. Benoit gives Jericho a back suplex from the top rope, lands on the back of his own neck. All three men are down. Benoit's clutching the back of his head, moving around, and now he's laying prone on the mat. Jericho's down, Austin's down, prone. And no joke, it was 40 seconds, which may not sound to some people like a lot of time, but in this situation, it's a lot of time. 40 seconds go by before Austin slow crawls over, covers Benoit, hooks the leg, and pins him. That was the finish of the match. Very anticlimactic, but the word was that Benoit may have legitimately had numbness in his limbs after the bump. I'm not saying he didn't get hurt or more hurt after the bump. I'm just saying they always credited this match as where it happened, and that's just not true, because he came into the match very, very much injured. But again, it didn't look like they called an audible or anything like that. It looked like that was the planned finish. That was the same match where Booker T came out when he debuted. He put Austin through the announce desk, which broke Austin's hand, and it really messed up his back pretty badly. So it was like the walking wounded in there. But they had to know that this was going to be Benoit's final night before he went off to have surgery. Benoit, man, he was a machine back then. The night before, he and Jericho won the tag team titles from Austin and Triple H, which is one of the greatest matches in Raw history that doesn't get talked about anymore for all the obvious reasons. The night before that, they had their Judgment Day pay-per-view. He wrestled Kurt Angle in a best 2 out of 3 falls match, one of those falls being a ladder match. So that's a 20-minute plus match. Later on, he comes back out on the same show. He and Jericho win a tag team turmoil match to become number 1 contenders. Then the next night, they win the titles in that great match. The night after that, at the Smackdown tapings, is where they do TLC 3. And he hurts his neck. The week after that, he worked back-to-back main events against Stone Cold Steve Austin for the title. One on Raw, and then again on SmackDown the next night. This man had a broken neck and did not slow down. And not only did he not slow down, but it did not diminish the quality of the matches that he had. That's what's crazy. Number 9, Edge and Seth Rollins. They had a great trilogy of matches back in 2021. Their first being at SummerSlam, their last match being inside Hell in a Cell in Saudi Arabia. In between, though, was their second match on the September 10th, 2021 episode of SmackDown from Madison Square Garden. They went nearly 25 minutes. Rollins picked up the win. It was a fantastic match. So at that point, they were all even at 1 win apiece going into the Cell, which was also an excellent match. I thought the entire trilogy was great. but this is one of the best matches in SmackDown history. Number 8. The early days of the brand split were great because it's the closest to a true battle of the brands that we really ever had, even in the years since, before it devolved into not mattering. The Billy and Chuck wedding on the September 12th, 2002 episode is a great example of this. Billy Gunn and Chuck Palumbo, for those who don't know, they were managed by Rico at the time, Rico Constantino. And he was doing, at this point, he started doing a gimmick. It was like he was their hairstylist, their fashion consultant, whatever you want to call it. And the two of them were very affectionate for each other. They started playing basically two gay men who were about to get married on TV. Or that's what we were supposed to think anyway. How progressive of WWE. So progressive, they even got GLAAD involved. The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, who they consulted with on the storyline. They actually helped WWE get mainstream publicity for the angle because they really thought that they were going to have or portray a gay wedding on TV. So imagine their surprise when they saw the angle play out with both men stopping the ceremony before it got too far to reveal that they in fact were not gay. Not that they have any problem with that, of course, but it was all just supposed to be a publicity stunt. And they said, Rico, what are you doing, man? This has gone too far. GLAAD was not happy about this. And frankly, they had every right to be upset. I mean, WWE blatantly used them and duped them into gaining media attention for what they thought was going to be a gay marriage and turned out to be two giant Samoans running out to beat the crap out of them and a woman. That was Jamal and Rosie, who laid out Stephanie McMahon with a Samoan drop. Stephanie was the SmackDown general manager at the time. See, this is what I loved about the angle. It was the swerve. It was so well done. Stephanie was in the ring for the ceremony, but so was the minister presiding over the ceremony. That minister, the old man in the ring, turned out to be Eric Bischoff, who at the time was the Raw general manager. That reveal when Bischoff's voice changes from the old man voice to his voice, and he starts ripping off and peeling off all the prosthetic makeup on his face, that was tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. This was Bischoff's single greatest piece of work that he did in the time he spent in WWE. Of all the segments that he was a part of, and he was a great GM, this right here, this was the best. I legitimately had no idea that it was him. And then 3-minute warning hits the ring. Again, a couple of Raw guys. It was like a little mini invasion. Stephanie gets laid out. Here comes the rest of the roster to chase them off. It was great television when the brand split felt like it really mattered and there was real competition between the two shows. Number 7. On the February 8th, 2016 episode of Raw, Daniel Bryan stood in the middle of the ring and he announced his retirement from pro wrestling. And it was a very emotional speech, as you would imagine, and not unlike the speech that Edge gave many years earlier when he retired. But if you're Daniel Bryan, 2016, you're not that far removed from 2014, which was the peak for him. And to go from the highest of highs in his career to the end of his career, I mean, you could just see it in his eyes. It was devastating. 2 years later, on the March 20th, 2018 episode of SmackDown, Daniel Bryan again stood in the middle of the ring, but this time to announce that he had finally been medically cleared to return to the ring and resume his career. And this was only 3 weeks before WrestleMania. It was a wonderful moment. You could see the joy in his eyes. You could see just how happy the fans were to have him back. And what he went through for the 2 years in between, trying to get cleared, going to every doctor, every specialist, taking every test imaginable. It finally paid off. Now, he was going to wrestle anyway. If WWE was not going to clear him, he was already talking like, yeah, when my deal's up, I mean, I'm the GM, and they had him doing different things, and he was getting paid well, but he was as good as gone. There was no way he was going to stay if they weren't going to let him wrestle. Because he wanted to go wrestle in Japan and Mexico and just do what he wanted to do. And I think they knew that. And so finally they relented and said, okay, all the tests say that you're cleared. We'll let you back in the ring. And then he did leave, ultimately. 3 years later, he left. And now this weekend, he's wrestling for the World Championship in the main event at Wembley Stadium. Number 6. Again, not a ranked list. I'm just using this to keep track of these things. The September 26th, 2002 episode of SmackDown featured an excellent match pitting Edge, who was first starting to really take off as a single star, against Eddie Guerrero in a no disqualification match. Edge and Eddie were two members of the so-called SmackDown 6 that helped carry that show under Paul Heyman when he was the head writer. The other 4 being Chavo Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Kurt Angle, and Chris Benoit. That was the SmackDown 6. Days earlier, Eddie had beaten Edge at Unforgiven, so this was the rematch, which Edge won. Great stuff from these two. One of the matches from those early days that still stands out to me and was a star-making performance for Edge coming off that great program he had earlier that year with Kurt Angle. It really felt like he was ready to break out, and then he was out for over a year after fusion surgery on his neck, stemming from an injury that he sustained in this match when Eddie slammed him on top of a ladder and then frog splashed him on top of the ladder. He had trouble feeling his arms after that. Wrestled a few more months. It's not like he was immediately out of the ring. However many more months it was. I think he continued to wrestle until like January or February. But it's amazing, you know, all those TLC matches. And this is the match that broke the camel's back. So he didn't even make it to WrestleMania that year. He went out. He had the surgery. That surgery is also what forced him into an early retirement in 2011, because once you have that fusion done, as Steve Austin found out, you are on borrowed time. Number 5. You know, the cost of living, man, it seems to go up every single year. Groceries are still very expensive. But Stone Cold Steve Austin, he doesn't give a shit about your grocery prices. At least he didn't on the December 13th, 2001 episode of SmackDown when he beat the living shit out of Booker T in a supermarket and used all the food he could get his hands on. It didn't matter what it was. I mean, there were nuts and there was cookies and flour and milk. They ended up doing about $10,000 worth of damage. I think they paid the place $20,000 between that and all the food they wasted. I cracked up right from the beginning of this when Booker, he starts eating cereal out of the cereal box. He's like, oh, I just got to check and make sure it's fresh. All right, we got a Grey Poupon reference from Steve Austin, for those who remember those commercials. He threw flour all over Booker and turned him into a white guy. The price check on Jackass line at the end as he's leaving the store was perfect. Everything about this, I love this. It was fun. You know, wrestling is best when it is just fun. This was fun, and this was one of the all-time great segments in the history of the show. This is a segment that I feel like is timeless. You know, because it worked back then, but if you were to air that on TV today, if you were to air this on TV 25 years from now, I still think you would have people laughing their ass off, just thoroughly entertained. It is timeless. Number 4, the best match, bell to bell, in SmackDown history is the 60-minute Iron Man match from the September 18th, 2003 episode for the WWE Championship between Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, which turned out to be their final singles match in WWE. Brock beat Kurt at WrestleMania. Angle tapped him out at SummerSlam. Came into the match as the defending champion. From the very first fall, it was smart on Lesnar's part. He used a chair. Even though it got him disqualified and it put Kurt up 1-0, he beat the hell out of him with that chair and ended up picking up the next 3 falls. By the time the match was over, it was 5-4 in favor of Brock. Kurt had him in the ankle lock. He almost tied it up. They almost went to sudden death. The time expired. Well, I mean, they were on UPN. Can't have sudden death on UPN. You got to go to the local newscast. So he won 5-4. Lesnar won the belt back. It's not my favorite Iron Man match of all time, actually. And it being the first one to air on TV, the commercials definitely hurt the match. It hurt the flow of the match because there were so many of them. But this was still great stuff. And even crazier when you consider that Kurt's sister died of a heroin overdose the day before this match. And he was an absolute wreck, but he hid the pain and he still went out there. And not only did he go out there and work, it's one thing to go, I got to go back to work the next day. He went to work and had one of the best matches of his life. This wasn't just an ordinary match. He had to go 60 minutes with Brock Lesnar, and they tore it up. Number 3, this is the best ending to a SmackDown episode ever. So if you're wondering, Solomonster, what's the best closing segment in 25 years of SmackDown? Here it is. Took place on the same November 15, 2001 episode as Paul Heyman's work shoot on Vince. This was the Go Home Show 2 Survivor Series. It was the closing moments to build to Team WWF against the Alliance. It was The Rock and Chris Jericho against Steve Austin and Kurt Angle. It's not that we haven't seen finishes like this since, where everybody runs in and hits their move, but it's never been done better than this, or with as much star power. So many legends and Hall of Famers in the ring for this. This was in the waning days of the Attitude Era. Angle and Austin, they were about to Pillmanize Rock's leg when Undertaker ran in, and he chokeslammed Steve Austin. He tried to do the same thing to Kurt Angle. Booker T ran in, though, with a super kick, and then Kurt hit an angle slam on Undertaker. Jericho gets back in the ring, takes out Booker, clotheslines Angle out over the top, lion salt to Booker, gets up, here's RVD, nearly takes Jericho's head off with a spin kick. Up to the top, 5-star frog splash. Here comes Kane, huge choke slam to RVD. Here comes Shane McMahon with a leaping chair shot to Kane's head. He just kind of bopped him right on the head with it. But here's the big show. He punches the chair back into Shane's face. Angle slides back into the ring, gets the big fucker up for an angle slam, and The Undertaker, with great ring awareness at all times, I'll never forget this, he's still laying in the corner, selling the angle slam, but he sees there is a chair laying on the mat in the spot where Big Show is probably going to land. So he sticks his leg out and moves the chair out of the way. Like a pro. Down goes Big Show. Now The Rock is back in the ring. Rock bottom to Angle. But then Rock turns around, walks right into a stone cold stunner. And with Jim Ross screaming his head off on commentary, there's bodies everywhere. And the only man left standing is the champion. The best ending ever. I go back and I watch this periodically. It never gets old. Number 2. The single moment I always think of. So not ending, but the single moment I always think of first, what I think of SmackDown, happened on the June 12th, 2003 episode. It was the ring collapse with Brock Lesnar and the Big Show. I think SmackDown, I think ring collapse. The two go hand in hand. And Taz, on commentary, dropping a holy shit that got bleeped out. Brock and Big Show, they were having a match when they went to the top, and Lesnar took him all the way down with a giant superplex that imploded the ring. We've seen them recycle this stunt a few times since. It never hits the same way. It's never been as good. It never will be. You can't top the original. I love to go back and look at the crowd whenever I go back to watch this, just to see their reactions. Like, these people are losing their shit. Because we had never seen anything like this before. The closest thing was in the movie No Holds Barred. Who the fuck saw that except my dumbass? In the movie No Holds Barred, when Hogan kills Zeus at the end, he knocks him off. They were like on the second level. And Zeus falls all the way down backwards into the ring, and the ring implodes on him. But we had never seen this on television before. Like on an actual wrestling show. And Mike Chioda was the referee for this match. His sell job, I mean, when the ring collapses and he falls down, like, it was perfect. And he had to sell it because Brock and Big Show, they were both down and out. Right? There was no more selling that they could do. So his facial expression was the first thing that we saw. And he said, like, he had the people in the back, Vince and whoever else, probably Vince. But Vince and Michael Hayes and everybody in his ear going crazy, like, yes, that's what we want. That's perfect. The only goofy thing about it was the fact that Lesnar and Big Show had to play dead. Like, it was a superplex, dude. I get that they're big guys, but still, It was a superplex. We see this every single week. And they had medics in the ring. They're all huddled around them. They had oxygen. They haven't moved. It's been 5 minutes. Like, it was just way over the top. But the actual ring collapse, like, you can only do it the first time. One time. And this was it. And it could not have come off any better than the way they did it. This was tremendous. And lastly, it's a sad moment, but a beautiful moment. From the first show that they did after the terrorist attacks on 9/11, it was 2 days later on September 13th, 2001, that SmackDown came to Houston, Texas. They were supposed to tape on 9/11, but that got canceled, as everything else did. All sports, everything. Planes were grounded. You couldn't travel anyway. I remember exactly where I was that day when the towers fell. I was in my dorm room getting ready to go to class. I went to class, but when I got there, my English teacher told us, class is canceled because how the hell can you think of anything other than what was going on in that moment? It was just a very surreal day. Wrestling was not the priority, but wrestling was still an escape for a lot of people, and so they made the decision to go live 2 days later. Vince McMahon came out. He gave his speech. All the members of the roster stood on the ramp and on the stage, but it was Lillian Garcia's rendition of the national anthem that even now, to this day, like, it brings tears to my eyes. Just so well done and so beautifully done for such an ugly moment in our history. I don't remember much else about that show. I know Kurt Angle wrestled Rhino in the main event. I legit do not remember anything else that happened that night. I will always remember that. And those are your 25 best matches and moments in SmackDown history on this, the 25th anniversary. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been a while since I've done one of these lists. Let me know what you think of the list and what your favorite SmackDown moments are.